Hey everybody, welcome once again to the Rise of the GM podcast. We're going to be talking about some strange disappearances on a river, a seductive immortal, and what does it mean to be the entertainer? We'll ask Billy Joel, but we'll also ask Adam and Matthew. Thanks for joining us on Rise of the GM. All right, well, it is good to be back with everyone again. I'm Matthew Thomas, this is Adam Caldwell, and I probably pointed the wrong way. I'll just point both ways. This is Adam Caldwell, and we are excited to be here today. We've had some good gaming stuff going on the week. I hear we have one of our guys who runs a game, he's a teacher at a school, and I always like to throw this kind of information out a little bit. Ben West, I'm going to throw your name on the air, but he's running a couple groups for students, and it's pretty exciting. I think one of the groups is doing 2E and one of them is doing 5E, which is a strange like breakup there, but I think it's one of the students' brothers had some 2E books and just said, here, you guys can use these, and they decided to do that. But then 5E, they're doing their stuff online with the 5E business. But how cool is that? He said he walked into a room and he heard people gaming on two different tables, and I can't remember what one of them said, but the other one was going, today, Junior. And boy, I've heard that in our games when Brandon's looking over his spell list. And sorry, Brandon. We're always hacking on you, Brandon, but it's all out of good love, both here and in another podcast I do. I hack on him. But anyway, it's been a good week. Have you had any good gaming stuff going on? I know that typically we have our game. I don't know if you do any other games right now or not.
It has been cool to see what's going on with Ben and those the students that he's given space to play for. But we played a couple hours after we recorded last time, and I think we had a good time. We had some investigations happening around a wedding, talking to some different groups that had attended that thing and finding out the skinny on what's going on in the city right now. So hopefully that'll move forward this week, and maybe there'll be
always fun because every week when we do this podcast, later this day we actually do our gaming group, and so I think at least one of our members always gets on here and he's looking for information for the game that's coming up. It's like, you're not getting anything, Josh. You're not getting anything. So.
Yeah. I think after we talked about how you shouldn't fight like one thing, I made you guys fight a single dragon last time too, right? So,
there were also these orbs that popped up, and I was wondering in my mind, are these the extras he's throwing around?
There were some extras,
they were definitely causing trouble.
Yeah. There was. I took my own advice and I added a few things in, and I got to play on Monday. It was between last time and this time. I got to run a little Sentinels Comics RPG with Eric and Evan. Got to do another session of that.
Did you run the new thing that was just released?
Terraforms? No. I'm actually running a similar game. So our Thursday night crew did that Sentinels Comics RPG. I don't know how long ago that was, 2 years, 3 years now at this point. But I'm actually using the framework of the story and kind of reusing that and seeing like what these guys do with just kind of the basic idea. So Eric and Evan, if you're listening, Matthew's got some information that you guys don't have.
Adam talks to me about the game you guys are doing, and it sounds like you have reacted completely differently than our crew did. Things have been very different. So it's always fun to kind of hear those comparison notes. You don't get to hear them till later because you're still in it.
Yeah. So we're doing that, and we're taking it real slow through there. We play a couple hours every other Monday kind of thing. So
By the way, Eric and Evan, when you listen to this, I miss you guys. So
both those guys hopefully will be guests at some point.
Yes. Yes, we are going to start having guest GMs on here before long, and that's going to be fun. Yeah. Well, hey, we are, as always, going to jump in with an encounter you can drop into the campaign you're doing to maybe help you if you're looking for something. So, Adam, why don't you start us off today with the encounter disappearances on the river.
Disappearances on the river. This is, again, from Eureka. We've talked about this, just kind of always want to give them credit. Gnome Stew writing these really great prompts for these things. So this is disappearances on the river. A fearsome monster has been preying on communities along the stretch of river about a dozen miles long. No one has actually seen it and survived, though many claim to have spotted the creature. It's generally agreed to be some kind of river monster emerging from the river to claim its prey and then slipping back into the water. The quote river monster can be one of a number of things, including an actual river monster, a powerful psychopath, human or otherwise, who haunts the region, a band of humanoids diverting attention from themselves so that they can kidnap locals for their stew pots, slavers picking the region clean before moving on, or an assassin's guild initiation rite. As no one knows the true nature of the threat at the outset of the adventure, you can also suggest several of these options through clues and other signs and eventually reveal the real threat. After the PCs are recruited to find and eliminate the river monster, this adventure takes place over 4 encounters. The first is investigating the threat and involves interviewing locals, examining at least one place from which someone disappeared, and trying to spot a pattern in the disappearances, like the time of day or the location or who was abducted. The second involves taking these clues and using them to attempt to catch the monster in the act. How this plays out depends on the clues that you seed and the tactics the PCs decide to employ. Part of the fun of this adventure is the planning and guesswork involved for your players. You can build suspense by having another disappearance take place while the PCs stake out their first potential location, but be careful not to drag things out just for the sake of it. Mm-hmm. The third encounter involves facing the threat and learning its true identity. If the PCs spotted the threat during the second encounter, this time around, they get a good look into exactly what it is. The fourth encounter is tracking down and eliminating the threat. The nature of this encounter will depend on what kind of threat that you selected. So that is Disappearances on the River.
So I like this one for a specific reason. A lot of times when people are beginning to GM and they think of an encounter, they're only thinking of like a battle. They're like, okay, now this orc comes out and they fight this orc. Okay, now in this one they're traveling through the woods and 3 centaurs start shooting arrows at them, and so they think a battle. And this one, the nice thing is, it kind of puts it into this encounter gets. They said in 4, you could do it in 3, maybe depending. I was trying to hear exactly how all 4 of those would work, and I kind of heard 3. But anyway, the idea of, they're going to be talking and interacting and trying to do some investigating in the first one. They're going to be staking out and trying to catch something that's not necessarily going to happen the way they expect it to. They talked about it could have happened somewhere else, could have happen here, and they just catch a glimpse, but they don't actually engage. And then the third one is they engage and they figure out exactly what this is, and then they got to figure it out. Maybe that's split into 2 the way they do it there. But I like the way that it sets a GM up for being able to think about 4 different encounters, and they could all happen in the same night. They don't have to be super long, but you're going to focus on different things. So you're going to focus on skill stuff in the first one, the investigating, the talking, who they're going to talk to. So you're going to have to drop some NPCs around, and you get some of that idea. Then staking it out, you let them make a plan. And so they have to do some planning. It's not just you're there, somebody's fighting you, and now you've got to fight back, but it's actually you get to set up how you think this is going to go. And then you can throw that little twist that it happens at a different place, or, they catch it just out of the corner of their eye, whatever. And then, the actual, and I like with the actual, unveiling of them and then the encounter happening, in my mind, this is just the way I think. I like to throw them for a twist. So instead of it actually being just a sea monster, which feels pretty generic, I would do something, and I have no idea what, because I haven't spent any. I just heard this the same time you guys all did as Adam read this, but I would probably either the creature would be something vastly different than what they expected with some kind of crazy ability, or it would be something totally different. And they gave the idea there you could do whatever you want, and they had people. Or some humanoids getting people for their stew pot, so it's not even something on the river. That's just a way to draw people in, or that's why people are disappearing. Or it could be, a distraction set up so that bandits can knock off something. So, I'd play with that, and I'd probably flip it so that it's a little different than what they expected. And I have no idea what I would make that, but it's just, again, as a GM, this gives you the framework to think, what are some different ways I can make this happen? So, yeah, short and sweet. I like that about it. What about you, Adam?
Yeah. I really like this as a either like a travel kind of situation where your PCs are traveling to go somewhere, um, and like tying it in even of okay, this is a problem that's kind of in the way of what you're doing, or even it could be like the person you're looking for has went missing to this thing. We need to investigate what's going on, to kind of draw them into that, because I do think that um, it depends on your group, and I think it depends on the part or maybe the level or like the point of the game that they're in. Sometimes I think you'll hear things and be like, well, that kind of stinks, but we have this to deal with. So, and that may be part
Mm.
of, I feel like some of my, most time in my games, there's a point where it's like urgency comes into play and you can't be pulled to the side into these other things.
Mm-hmm.
But like causing it for a reason. Okay, we really need to investigate this because we got to find that in researcher that went missing down by the river because he has information that we need. So trying to tie that in, I think would be good. That's how I would probably play that. But I do like that what you said about there's like all these different aspects of the way it gets played. You don't just come in rolling dice to attack the thing. You have to ask around. You have to investigate. You have to make some perception checks. You have to do all those things. And I'm even, I don't know. I'm trying to think. This may be one of those things where I would feel like seeding. It uses that word like seeding these different rumors and ideas, and almost allowing the flow of the game to tell us what it actually is in the end. Like let it take on a mind of its own almost. I don't know if you ever do that, Matthew, but there's times where I feel like I kind of throw out a couple ideas and either, there's that joke of like sometimes the players come up with better ideas than you bring to the table and then you
Mm-hmm.
just go with it, kind of thing. It's like that's happened. And, as it's seeded, maybe the thing that's like, man, I really wanted it to be, some crazy octopus thing that was in the water, but like they're really freaked out about this cult that's taking people. Maybe we go that way, because it's like what they've gripped onto. So I think that's kind of a fun thing to do as well. And I think I would like play with that multi possibility, situation a lot with that, and kind of enjoy that as the players kind of muddle through it. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and as just a GM point, say you were planning for like a big octopus, and they really were all about this cult. This is where it's good to be able to quickly find like some stat blocks and skin
Mhm.
it like for the
Yeah.
story you have, even if they're not exactly, yeah. So I used to use this program called Combat Manager that was so great, and then they quit
Mhm.
supporting it on the iPad. Just it would kill all the iPads. And it would just not even open. But I can still use it on my computer.
Mhm.
But it was like cool because you could like quickly type in something like city guard, and it would give you a list of 5 different city guards with just a
Yeah.
stat block. And you could just say, okay, I'm going to take this stat block for the city guard, but this is going to be the cultist.
Mhm.
They don't know that these stats, what they should be or shouldn't be. And as a matter of fact, even if they think they do know, it's good when it's different
Yeah.
because that keeps them on their toes. But anyway, you can pull these, like, just find something that's similar in a moment, pull it up, and just be ready to go with it. But
Right.
you're describing it as, these cultists and the high cultist, that that might be this like, you found a druid, shaman,
Mhm.
and you reskin that as this cultist, and so you tweak things to make it kind of work with your story. But
Right.
that's a good skill to get in your belt, to have some stat blocks at your disposal, however they are. And there are other programs out there. I mentioned Combat Manager, which I wish the dude who made that would have kind of kept updating that because it is so great. It was so great because you could instantly find stuff, and you could, like I could take a stat block and say, take this up, hit dice 5 levels, make this giant template. Make this young. So you could make it bigger, smaller, and kind of keep that stat block, but it would like increase or decrease the challenge rating of that. And it was really, really cool. I think there are other apps out there that do this kind of thing, or at least other apps that give you like generic stat blocks. But the nice thing about that was you could adjust it on the fly, because, you know, if you're using a stat block and everybody could kill it in one hit, that's no good.
Right.
You want to kind of make it a little stronger. And sometimes you can just do that by increasing hit points or, you know, giving them more damage, but it might be a little harder to figure out, how do I do that? Whereas if you just like, I'm going to raise this guy up until it says he's a CR 13, you know,
Yeah.
then you've got it kind of across the board in how that works. But
was that the Combat Manager multi-system, or was that like a Pathfinder oriented thing, or how did that work?
The Combat Manager, and again, I'm like promoting something that doesn't even mostly work anymore. But
Don't go looking for it.
I mean, you can. It used to work on an iPad, and then it also worked on Windows. So platform-wise, you could use either. But I think it was 3.5 and Pathfinder. You could choose one of those. And the cool thing was, like, I chose the Pathfinder one, so it used the Pathfinder rules. I mean, I set it to Pathfinder rules, but you still had like a whole bunch of 3.5 monsters in there, which the kind of cool part about that is some people are sticklers. It's like, hey, I got to stick to things that are in Pathfinder. It's all online, or I got to stick to things that are 3.5. I like the option of having something that was 3.5 and kind of pulling it into Pathfinder rules, and, you know, this is what it would be. And that one lets you do that. As far as I know, it never went to 4.0 or 5.0, probably that's why he let it go defunct, because most people were jumping on 5.0. I don't know.
Yeah, that's something, if any of you have good like options for that, be sure to toss that in the comments, you know, at our different socials and things like that. It'd be nice to know.
For our listeners, not for us, for our listeners.
Yeah, for their listeners, for sure.
But also for us.
We can pass it on. Kind of going back, I have like a two like road kind of way, and we were kind of talking about one of them, but this like disappearances on the river. One of them would be, I really like the kind of peeling back the onion, even with smaller encounters kind of things. So, you know, if it is, I think like the cult kind of thing, or the like the monsters for the stew pots, that kind of does that a little bit, where it's like, oh, we realize that this isn't the actual thing, but now we're going to go after this. I remember it was actually a river encounter in one of the campaigns I ran. I know you were in that, Matthew. There was I know there were a ton of dragons involved, but you guys were on a river, and there was a situation where the town was kind of being harassed by these creatures. And what we ended up finding out as you got into it, and you like went to like, oh, we're going to clear these things out, is that those things all had been basically removed from their homes because there was a worse thing downriver that had taken over where they lived. And so it was more about like, okay, we're not just going to kill all these things. We're going to go deal with that situation
and let these things go back to their natural habitat. They can go back
to where they're supposed to, where they didn't want to bother anybody. And I found that to be like a little more interesting than just like, okay, hack and slash these things and move. So I kind of like that as like, even kind of tying that into, even if it is a creature, maybe the creature is not the actual issue. I mean, again, maybe it's taken some people, so that's a problem, but like it's there because of something else. So that can kind of make it wider. But I wonder like how you feel about this. And I don't know if I've actually ever done it, but the almost a Scooby-Doo thing where it's like, it's not some spawn of Cthulhu, it's Farmer Maggot, you know, you pull the hat off, and it's like the farmer. He's like, oh, I would have got away with it, you know. And I don't know. Have you ever like experienced that? Because I think that'd be a funny way to deal with it, but I don't know if it'd be satisfying.
I'm trying to remember if I've ever done that in a game. I do think you could do that, and I do think depending, especially if it was someone that was like, quote, pretending to be their friend in town, but was trying to run everybody off for whatever reason, that could be interesting and well done. But yeah, off the top of my head, I can't remember ever doing that. Not that I wouldn't, though. Not that I wouldn't. Hey, let's go ahead and jump into our main topic for today. If you guys are Billy Joel fans, he had a song, I Am the Entertainer, and I know just what you want. Well, this is about being the entertainer. Nothing about Billy Joel. You can look that song up on your own, but this is about being the entertainer. And so a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about these, and I will confess that in my head, I always kind of get mixed up the idea of entertainer and storyteller. And I'm like, yeah, I love to be the entertainer. But I was mostly talking about storytelling, using accents, being in the mood, like role playing my character. That's probably more storytelling. We're going to talk about that another week. Today we want to talk though, what is being the entertainer? What kinds of stuff goes in? And so they gave this analogy in the focal point book of lights, camera, action. That's the storyteller. That's following, getting right in on the story. But like the lights, that's the bringing the stage lights up and having the setting, having the set. And that goes in a few different directions. And we're going to talk about kind of the gamut of that today. Just lots of different parts about what it means to have the set, what it means to have the lights, what it means to be the entertainer. So I don't know if there's a certain way you want to start this, if there's a certain order you want to go through this, Adam, but let's just jump in and tackle it.
Yeah. I think we can just kind of talk about it from kind of our points of view here. One of the reasons, just kind of get like the why, I wanted to get a little deeper into this than even like we talked about last week, lights, camera, action, the entertainer, storyteller, facilitator. But I wanted to get a little deeper into that because I think a lot of times people will ask me like, how do I get started? Or like, I'm wanting to run this game, but I'm not really sure what do I need to know? And
right.
A problem I have is I like want to hand to them like my 20-page document of like, here's all the things you should do as a GM. And it's like, that's not helpful. And I've gotten out of control as far as like what I think people need to know. So I like this because one, again, it's like, do what you can, work to get better at your craft, get experience, give each other a lot of grace, and these kind of things I think are important as you just like try. And but looking at like, okay, here's some actual roles that we can play in, of like, we're going to do some entertainment, we're going to do some storytelling, I'm going to help you work through the rules, and we're going to have an awesome game, so I thought it was like worthwhile to dig a little bit deeper, and kind of look at an entertainer. One of the things that really grabbed me, kind of came to mind as I was like reading through some of these notes is the like space that you play in.
Yeah.
Like that
from
is
the very
really
beginning.
Yeah, really important. And I don't know, like I feel like I played in a ton of spaces. I think like I want to like Matthew, like as far as that for you, what tends to help you like space wise and like where you're playing?
So yeah, like you said, I love the idea when people are first starting to think about GM, and they're always thinking about books and numbers and and the first thing going all the way back to the beginning is, all right, think about where you're going to be and space. And it's kind of like you said, part of it is just get started, right? Just get going and then get better. But to get started, you have to have a place that you're going to play. And there's all kinds of places you can play. And it talks about some of that in this idea of the entertainer. And we've been in a lot of those places. So I think when I first started, we would go over to Danny Brown's house and we would play at his dining room table, which was pretty easy because his wife was playing with us and they had no kids. It was just them two in the house and their cat. And then we'd come over. And so we could monopolize the center of this house. And it was like no problem. When we first started playing at my house, I was a bachelor. So we could do anything we wanted in any room of the house and nobody cared. We typically played at the kitchen table, but there were times when we were in a living room setting and it was like set up a little differently. And even when I got married, my wife kind of was around the house. She would typically go upstairs when we were living there on 11th Street. And we had this little room that we played in, but we could move out into other areas of the house. That was all pretty easy. But then you have to think about, for us now, we each have kids and families. And so there is something to be said for it. There have been times where we're playing and families are kind of really close, and that does change the way you play. Because where I might fly into like character and role playing when it's just me and the guys I'm playing with, when there's other people sitting around watching, I'm much more subdued because I don't want to be like that crazy guy. And it's the same thing. Let's say somebody's like, "Hey, yeah, we're going to get together and play at the coffee shop." Well, that could be a cool place if they have a back room. But the instant somebody else comes in with a coffee and a book and they sit down, you're going to feel a whole lot more self-conscious about being like, "You kids better get out of here, or I'm going to sick old dragon on you." And if you say that loud and in that kind of voice, that person is going to look at you, and you're branded in this town now forever as the weird guy sitting in the coffee shop doing what? So space can matter. It's nice to have like access to some spaces like a coffee shop or something, but probably not ideal. For us, often it's been, a basement, a room that's kind of, I have a room at my house that we played in a lot, a back office where we could close the door. And even that got harder a little later in life as my kids got older and would constantly knock on the door, and my son would come in and stand there, and then he'd start picking up the minis and he'd say, "Oh, you guys should fight a beholder." And we're like, "Okay, hey son, go in the other room. I love you. Go in there." And I love that he's getting interested in it, but it made it a little harder to like be in that moment. And then, of course, the world went to computers. We have a place here, a room here. I'm at Campus House, a place where I work. We have a large conference room that we use occasionally, and that's nice. There's even a small conference room that I thought might be unique in that it's kind of got a little more of a round table situation instead of a longer rectangular table. But all this to say, lots of different considerations as far as just the space and the privacy. But then also what you can do with that space. When we're in a building like this, we can do some stuff, but then we got to get it set back to how it normally is for the stuff that we do here at work. At home, I can leave that a little more, although our gaming room also became our homeschooling room, which meant that I couldn't just leave the minis all set up in the at the cliffhanger edge where I left them last week and expect it to all still be there next week. Things would get erased, characters would get moved, and I'd be like, "What happened to my table?" So space considerations matter. When you're a new GM, do try to think about like, where can we be free to like really enact? Where can we be free to lose ourselves in this? And what is it that will put us in the mood for that? And that's a lot of what this set of chapters in this book and this topic is about. I feel like I'm talking and talking and talking.
No, that's good. That's really good. Yeah. I do think that space for people to be comfortable is like important. I like
real quick. I'm going to cut you off. I let you talk and then I just grabbed it right back. But you said something that reminded me. I kind of alluded to, we went online, the world went online and things got different because now you're in a computer instead of at a table. But I think your surroundings still matter. I know I don't want to I don't want to speak out of turn here, but I know one of our, the guys we play with, Chris, his wife also teaches vocal lessons in the background. He'll be sitting at home, like trying his best to focus. And there's like this singing going on in the background and he finds a way to focus. But I also know that he has told me, and not necessarily just because of there, sometimes he comes to his office here and he's online. But I know he's told me it's a lot easier for him to be really locked in and involved when we're in person. When it's on a computer screen, harder for him to sit there and just kind of watch, especially when it's not his time to be interacting. And I don't think he's alone in this. I'll just go ahead and broaden this out to all of us. When we're sitting there on a screen and it's not necessarily our interaction, it's easier to get up and go do something over here and go out there and get something. And then that's like, the GM's like, "All right, I need, what's his name here? He needs to make a check on something. Does anybody know where he's at?" And it gets really weird. And so I do love in person, as nice as it is to be able to be online. I think there's something about creating that space. So sorry to have grabbed that back so quickly.
That's okay. Yeah. I think like a place that like the entertainer comes out for me, it's almost like a subclass of that in some ways. Um, I tend to think in terms of hospitality as far as like the way that I like to set. So if I'm, if I have like students coming to play, I want to have like the table set in little tables. And I feel like we get that when we meet in person now, where it's like, okay, we have these tables set for everybody to be able to put your stuff and your drinks, and just like here's some chairs out, and um it being like a place to gather is like important
Right.
to me. And I think it comes from, we've told our stories, but it's like people have welcomed me into their homes with
Hmm.
gaming from the beginning, and like made me comfortable and said, hey, like Mikasa Sukasa here, like kind of thing. And I think that again, that's coming out of me with that too. So I don't, that's part of that, of like entertaining people on a broader scale, not just in the moment kind of thing. So I do think like find a place you can be comfortable, whether it's with the way that you role play or just to be with people and not feel like tense or anything like that. I have played in some not necessarily public, like coffee shop public, but some more public where there's like people in and out. And there is a thing where it's like, oh, you're like in the moment, and then some person walks in who has nothing to do with gaming at all and is just staring at you. You're like,
And it just
hi,
jerks
hello.
you
It's
right
like,
out of that
yeah, it's
moment.
like any
Yeah.
any of that uh I lost the word for it, but being in, yeah, like in the moment is gone.
That
Um,
immersion.
yeah, the immersion. Yeah, exactly. Immersion. Um, you kind of started moving that way, but another thing that they talk about is uh, within like the set, we're talking in kind of that lights, camera, action thing, is even just the way the table is dealt with.
Set up.
And
Hmm.
like, the game table probably shouldn't be like, well, my old chicken wings and my coffee cup and all these random things that we've just like thrown on the table, and you can't get to the miniatures. And like maybe, they even talk pretty technically about like have those secondary tables for all of that stuff, and like your personal books, and let the kind of table be the table. um
I'll tell you a little story. So here at the campus house, we have like round tables, and I am all about setting several of those up around between each player, so they all have a place off to the side. At home, we don't have all those round tables, and my wife used to get so angry because I'd keep all these like little kind of, what do you call them, like end tables, and
uh
yeah, just various tables that didn't match. But I'm like, don't get rid of those
yeah.
because I use those every week. I put
Yeah.
those around between the guys
Mhm.
because I can remember times. So first of all, I'll say, you can start off, we talked before, with a chessboard. We started off,
Yeah.
that was our grid, 64 by 64. It was
Mhm.
kind of limited. We then got one of those like rollout mats, and I think Adam still has one. Josh has one. Some guys a guy that we game with, they have these rollout mats that are a little bit bigger. And then I went like, you can go all the way to crazy, where I had what is it, a 3 foot by 6 foot table, and I
Yeah.
printed out a grid and
Mhm.
taped together and put a piece of what do you call that plastic?
Yeah.
We're so good with words. You buy it at the hardware store. It's like
Right.
acetate. It's not
Yeah.
acetate. It's like
Right.
thick
Clear
plastic.
plastic.
Anyway, I put that over the whole thing, so we can draw with markers, but we have this permanent grid under there that is the right size, and that's been really great. But what I found out was, as great as this table was, there were times where so many people were sitting around with computers on the table. And again, we're going to hack on Brandon Harris because he's so easy, but he had this big 17-inch, a small TV sitting there on the table. And like, you could never, I'm like, get that thing off the table. And so these little side tables are a place where people can put their screen,
Right.
iPad, their computer, their drink, their chips, whatever, so that you keep your gaming area kind of a little less cluttered. It keeps people in the moment, seeing what's going on there, and able to make sense of it and get to everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I think something that's kind of coming to mind, and I should probably do better. And I'm like teaching myself now, is like those kind of things when you come to a game, even maybe having some like ground rules may sounds a little bit even like too forceful for me, but like expectations, like, hey, like let's do it this way so that we can have the most efficient fun here, kind of
Mm.
thing. And also, I feel like that where I want to be like modeling that, or I'm going to take care of my own stuff where I don't want to come in and just throw stuff everywhere to set that tone, so that's something I try to think of, particularly now because we're online, like 2 weeks and then in person 1 week. And then that it gets a little different where my space at home around the computer can get real bad.
Hmm.
It's like, well, here's my dinner that I was still eating when we logged on, and um, all these, books from all these random RPG things like laying all over the place. Like none of that stuff needs to be here. So I'm kind of challenging myself now at this point of like, okay, I need to like go clean that table up before tonight. So we're
Yeah.
ready to do that. But yeah, I think the set, that set is important to think about. And it's not something that we necessarily have always thought about, but definitely makes it a smoother play, kind of thing. So I do think that's really important.
Quick note on that. You mentioned dinner. I do think it's really cool for people to be able to eat. For you not to be so like, hey, we're just gaming. Please don't bring
Right.
food, because that's half of a gaming night fun. When Ben West, guy who games with us, comes in and he's like, "Here's 4 bags of chips and a bunch of gummy worms and some." Everybody's like, "Yay!" Everybody's super excited, and he dumps that stuff on the table, and that's great. Then we move it all off the table to side tables,
Right.
and hey, can you pass that? Can you pass this?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah,
that's
yeah.
part of the fun, and I think it's good to let that be in there. But yeah, make sure that you kind of keep that play space
Yeah.
clear enough for playing.
Right.
And in this topic, they also talk about sometimes making your play area the focus, and there's different ways you can go about it. And so we've been talking a lot about fantasy games, and we particularly we rely on maps with squares. We love our squares, our grids, and that's typically the center of whatever we're playing. But he talks in this section of this book about like the idea that you can have games that are more interactional, where you pull like cozy seats, recliners, and soft chairs in a circle. That then lends itself to the way interaction people are focused on each other and interaction.
Yeah.
So that would be more theater of the mind, less kind of tactical rolling sort of thing, because you don't have the space for it. But it might be one night doing something like that really changes things up.
Mhm.
Or he talks about making the table the full focus. And again, the type of game may really dictate that differently. We've played with a friend of ours, Barry Hudek. He would set up these, I don't even know what you call them. They had like terrain all over the whole table. So he had like a whole
Mhm.
6-foot table just full of like
Yeah, the miniatures
mountains,
battles. Yeah.
the measure battles. You have like a little tape measure, and you have characters, and they're coming from opposite ends of the table or whatever. And like everything on that table, there's no extraneous stuff. It's just the battle map, all the characters, and the focus is very hyper focused on that table. And so that's a different way you can do it.
Yeah.
And then there's kind of more what we do, where it's a little of both. But it's not just the table, right? Sometimes it's the stuff around. And they talk in that book about like, think about what else is in your room. And if there's something that's highly distracting, maybe take that out during this time, and maybe put around yourself some things that just put people in the right frame of mind. They may have, I think he talked about like if you're fighting undead, get one of those cheap plastic skulls and just leave it sit there. It's
Yeah.
not that that's going to be like a prop in the game, but like every time their eyes roam over that, they're reinforced this idea that we're dealing with
Right.
undead. We're dealing with, and it keeps them in that place. What kinds of stuff do you generally think about having around that keeps you in a place in your game? Or do you ever think about that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's I almost need the like absence of things is like kind of for focus. It's like having my phone sitting right there is not a great thing as a player,
Mm-hmm.
or honestly as the GM. It's like it's going to have notifications go off. We know this. Like I
Right.
don't need to have that constantly as I'm wanting to focus in, unless there's like a good reason that I need to be waiting on it. But yeah, I do like props, and I may be veering into another thing with that, but it's not often. I don't feel like I do that a ton, but there may be a thing like, oh, you received a letter, and hopefully I had time that week, and I could take a little piece of cool looking paper and write the letter, handwrite it out, and throw it down on the table, and they can read that, and there's like something tactile about that. There's something visual. It kind of brings you in. I've been known to be in a situation where it's like, maybe something's burning, or you're like in a volcanic situation, and even just like the light a match and kind of let it smoke, and then there's that like scent of burning, that's in there. Some of that more evocative, like sensory stuff. Again, this isn't like every time we play, obviously, but those things like that I like to bring in every now and then, just to like deal with the senses. So yeah, that's some of them. But I haven't really used like the kind of visual so much. I have a map right now that every time we get in person, I throw it to Josh, because his character is carrying a map of the world right now. And that's something I like to like point back to, even of, hey, this is kind of a cool looking thing. And we're talking about locations. So like, where on the map is it? Just to kind of bring you back into the world and remind you like, okay, we're centered on this, not like here, kind of deal.
And that it even adds to the gameplay, because Josh's character loves having that map and loves having the ability to like limit who can see it.
Yeah.
so we have a couple of players who are like, well, it's on your map there. And he's like, well, you're not getting to see it.
Yeah.
Like opens it up by himself and looks at it. And it informs their role play.
Yeah, for sure.
That thing. Mm-hmm. In the book, they talk about with this idea of senses and making a scene. You don't do it all the time, but they give 3 guidelines, I think, that are really good. And they say, pick a place, maybe in each night, or pick a place maybe if you don't do every time you get together, maybe every other time or a couple times, find one scene that you're going to like make more. And they tell you 3 things you can do with that. First, they say engage the senses. So kind of like what you were saying with the lighting of the match, or, in one of the examples they were talking about, it's like this idea, they had to run down the side of this snow-covered mountain and get away from this or chasing this beast or whatever, but they also had to be careful not to fall off into this chasm that would mean sure death. And so he put this big sheet up over boxes, and to really kind of make it like more than the third. Okay. So engage the senses is the first thing. The second one is make it different from usual fare, which that sheet over the boxes would do. And the last one is go big. Make it bigger than usual. So what you do is, you don't do this with every scene. A lot of your scenes are going to be just normal. They're going to be like on the battle map. They're going to be engaging, whatever. But try to pick, whether it's like the beginning of an evening session, something that's just different, or like maybe the finale of the evening, where you do something that's out of the ordinary, and you make it different, so that they have to think of things differently. And you're not going to do it all the time. But that idea of incorporating senses, incorporating sight, something that's huge and different, maybe not like on a normal horizontal map, but like on something vertical they've got to do, or like on that snow-covered mountain, they have to navigate on this sheet. And it kind of, they're trying to put their little characters on there and not let them slide off on the floor. Well, that's very realistic on a snowy side of the mountain, and so you make it, and he talked about in there, show them the danger of that by letting like a minion fall off, and you hear the scream all the way down until you don't hear it anymore, and you realize that's death if we do that. And so it puts things different. I think of this, and I just met a friend not long ago named Royal, and he may join us on this podcast sometime, but he was talking to me about, and Royal, if you're listening to this, I'm going to butcher this story. Probably should let you tell it when you're on. But anyway, he was telling me about a story where It was more of a live action role play, but it's one that actually happens in different cities here in Illinois. And him and a bunch of his friends like loaded up in their car and went to this place where this other group was doing things to them. I can't remember exactly what, but they were vampires, and they came into this place, and they ended up, rolling initiative better and sneak so well, whatever it was, that the GM got with him. He said, okay, how do you want to do this? And so here's what they did. And this is the point I'm getting to. Instead of at a normal table, he met with them first, and he said, what do you want to do when you guys all get together? And he said, well, we rolled really good on this. And so what we want to do is we want to put chairs in this room that represent us. Mm-hmm. And then they went out, and then he said, okay, the next group, you get to, you're having this meeting before, and so they all go in there, and they stand around with these chairs. Naturally, they kind of stand with their backs to these chairs. And then he's like, okay, you made your plan. Now everybody freeze where you're at, because in reality, they snuck up on you. They are represented by the chairs. And so all these guys had their backs to these chairs. Wow. And the other group got to like have initiative. And so they're all like slitting throats from behind and like grabbing. It's like, it was like this wonderful sort of different than a table.
Yeah.
They could have sat down and said, okay, what do you want to do? Okay, you're here, you're here, you're here. And that's one thing. But like for these people to be trying to make plans and not realize that the right. people have snuck up on them already by represented where these chairs are, and then the battle just starts, and it's like they're going crazy from there. That's a very different. So does that engage the senses? Yeah, because it's like spatial. Does it make it different from usual? Absolutely different from a tabletop. And does it go big? Yeah. And so those three ideas, engage the senses, make it different than what you normally do, and go big, to occasionally sprinkle into your games. Now I'm gonna say I don't do that very well. I kind of get into this rut of like my game is always at the table and it's this and that. But even if it's something small, like Adam was talking about, where you light a match and then let it burn out, so you smell that in the air, and maybe you have like a red light that is on, and you turn off all the other lights, so it's just a red cast to everything. This is you guys going into the volcano. Yeah, that changes everything in people's minds. And so doing some stuff, that's what it means to be the entertainer, right? You're setting the stage, you're setting the lights, and then you also are doing some music stuff. And I'm going to let Adam talk about music, because he probably does that more than me.
Yeah. That's something I really do enjoy. I want to say one thing real quick before I move into the music, because I'll forget it. I think there's something about, you probably heard the phrase like active listening.
Yeah.
And it's like the way your body language portrays things. And I think that, we talked about voicing and posture, and I know we'll come back to that eventually, but how that posture with like the NPCs of, it's like I'm this little thing that's like, I'm kind of afraid, or like I'm up in your face and bigger kind of thing. Those are pieces of that. But I do think even as part of like a game runner, no matter what you're doing, that active listening is super important. I'm actually leaning forward and listening to my players. I'm not like, oh man, like just cracked into the wall, but I'm not like, zoned out, lean back. I don't really care what they're saying, right? Like that's kind of what it's showing.
I think more importantly, as a GM, what you have to be careful about is there's a tendency to be like, okay, what are you going to do here? And then they start talking, and then you're over here like looking at your monster stats and like looking at rules, and they can tell you're planning something. You're not really engaged. But instead you're like, what are you going to do about it? And then they start talking, and you're like, are you kidding me? And like, you're just like right there. They are in that moment.
Yep. So that's like a really good thing. I just wanted to toss that into the mix. But as far as like music, I have said, I really love the tone that music sets, or even some sound effects sometimes, but mostly just the music. And at bare minimum, a thing I like to do is have, something for like battles. So, okay, it's gotten intense, and we're going to play this. And again, I I have like two major battle music songs currently loaded up in our Roll20 for our virtual time, and I need to put more in. But those get used for that. I like to have just kind of normal everyday, like whether you're traveling or just kind of you're around a city or whatever that be. It's just kind of a low key kind of instrumental music that's playing. But something that, and then there'll be some other things depending on if I like moving into kind of maybe a different area of the map. It's like maybe the culture is different, or it's just a different feel. Like I have a specific one for this port city that we're in, that we started in, that has like even some waves behind it, and it sounds a little more, I don't know, jaunty is kind of the word, like as far as like sailory kind of thing, and that kind of thing. So those are things, but for the game we're in now, and I don't know if it's even been noticed by the players, but I have a very specific song that is for a very specific reason, and it's kind of a thread through the game. And when that song plays, I'm like, maybe this is new information, but when that song plays, it has to do with a specific thing that I'm not going to say right now. but it's part of the thread of the game, and I'm like, I heard that song a while ago, and I'm like, that is the song that I'm going to put into this, and I want to make use of. So I think that can be a cool thing. And, even if it's not noticed right now, at a certain point, maybe it will be of like, hey, like every time we interact with X thing, the song's also playing in the background if Adam remembers to turn it on, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I like that kind of stuff. Again, you don't have to have that. That's not, and not everybody's built that way. I know some people are like, I don't really like music. It's kind of distracting to me. And I want to be sensitive to that too. Like if all the players are like, we don't like music, then I'll get over it and not play music. But those are some things I'm thinking about typically when I'm setting up a game, is like, what's some like basic stuff that can kind of play. There's, if you use like YouTube, it's super easy to just be like 20 hours of fantasy, gaming music. Like there's hundreds of channels you can just click and go, let that play. But I like to have some specific music to kind of bring into places too.
I really like that idea of characters with their motif music. It really reminds me of Star Wars. Chris, who plays in our game, a coworker of mine, he was once doing a talk, and he talked about how in Star Wars, like whenever, Luke was around, there was like his motif. And when Darth Vader was around, there was his motif, and it would be woven throughout. And it really, when you heard that, it like got you in the, you were there. So another thing I think we've tried to do in the past, various success rates. The idea of I think there's an app called DJ, Dungeon Master DJ, and others. There's tons of them out there, but they have like sound effects, crackling fire, tavern, whatever, man screaming. Some of them aren't that great. You get that same man. But like, there's been times where I try to do that. My problem is that I have a hard time, like in the moment, like doing that and keeping coherent in my storytelling. So one thing that you might do is have somebody that you give somebody who loves to do this kind of thing, say, hey, I want you to like think about like background sounds, like ambient sounds, not necessarily all these like man screaming sound effects, but like the fire crackling, or on a river, or, in a boat, or, at a tavern, or maybe specific musical kinds of cues. So like Ben, the guy we talked about earlier, who has students doing this, in our last game, he was sitting there, and as we're at this wedding, when the wedding starts, all of a sudden he like hits play on his computer, and these like trumpets are going, and it's very, and he did another thing later in that night, and I thought, yeah, he seems to be a guy who likes that. So you might take somebody like that and say, hey, here's a library of sound effects in this app, or here's some stuff you just kind of keep this part rolling, and I'm going to just be in the story. Because for me, I can't do both. I've tried. I always thought it would be a great idea, but like when I'm really in the story, I'm not stopping to hit buttons very well. The best I do is, and probably the only place I use music very much, is the beginning of a game to like do our recap. Actually, let me me see.
The game.
Nope, that's not it. I'm looking for a certain sound here. Nope, not that one. I went one too far. Let's try this one. Yes. So we have a game called The Dormant Mind, and every week I do a recap into the game, and it would go something like this. Last time, our heroes found themselves standing in front of a great massive wall of jello. Jello that burned with acid and fire. As they stood there looking dumbly upon this wall, one stuck their hand in, immediately to be burned. They wondered what would happen when the great monster then split forth from the wall of jello. You know, and I'm making stuff up now, but I would talk about this and I would make it so exciting, giving this recap of what's happening as they stand there in this great moment wondering. The Dormant Mind. And I would hit my tagline then right at that drop, and I would time that pretty well. And so for me, that's about the big place of music, is setting the scene by recapping this like epic sort of thing with that. But music all through can be good. Again, if you like to use that sort of stuff. Well, listen, we don't want to spend too much longer on this idea of the entertainer, because we got, we know we've already been talking for 56 minutes, but anything else before we move on to our NPC, Adam?
One final thing that I think could be good, just a good tip that comes out of Focal Point. They speak about this 3-2 rule for memorable NPCs. And it's something, if you're running a game, you're doing this, you want NPCs to be not just somebody that they interact with and then forget about. Their idea is this: give them 3 interesting details about your NPC. Visual, the way they talk, a mannerism, like whatever that is, because they're only going to remember 2 of them. So it's that idea of give them more, because they're not going to remember everything, but it's going to stick in their brain. And I thought that was a really good tip just to hold on to when you're trying to be like, okay, this is a person we want in this game for a while. They have a reason to be here. It's not just random shopkeep, as they're trying to sell off stuff and then we're going to forget about it. So that's a really good tip that I think is worthwhile when you're doing that as part of the entertainer.
And so that segues perfectly into this next section, and that is our NPC that we always like to give you like this kind of NPC you can drop into different campaigns. And so we like to do that and then show you how we would use them. So let's just jump right in. This one is Comtesse Adelta Ventronis. And here's a little bit about her. She is the seductive immortal. The appearance. So she's someone who wears layers of skirts, this boned bodice, generous makeup, strawberry blonde hair pulled up behind her, up on her head there. And she glides with exuberance and grace, kind of always smiling, this very welcoming hostess sort of person. In the role-playing details they give, she speaks in vivid terms using color, texture, artistic expressions. She describes everything as if she's, making a painting, and she's just disarmingly charming and seemingly harmless person. Personality, she's adept at playing people like a musical instrument via flattery. So she's someone who flatters people a good bit. She engenders calmness in people. She may yield points in the conversation in order to gain in other areas. And she seems remarkably well informed in everything. Everything you talk to her about, she just seems like she knows a lot about a lot. Motivation for this character is the acquisition of wealth and power. So this is what the characters don't necessarily know. She's all about gaining wealth and power along with the food she requires. You'll hear more about that. And that drives her to do everything she does, even the things she does that kind of end up being sadistic. Background, though no records show it, the Comtesse is not of noble birth. All right. She was born generations before the first in Ventronis ever were. In truth, the Comtesse has lived for hundreds of years via her nefarious ability to sap the life from her victims. And I love this about her. Skilled artist, she paints targets with an unusual clarity using magical pigments. This in turn binds their life force to her so that she may slowly feed on them, absorbing the victim's knowledge, which is why she's so knowledgeable about so many different things, and their vitality, which is why she has lived so long, right? That's the food that she needs. She prefers to have any to have many concurrent victims so as to extend the process. So she's not just sapping one person complete and then another person complete. She has lots of people she's drawing from all the time. But she has also drained husks of people in her dungeon that she has just painted really quickly and sucked completely dry because she needed that for some reason, right? So when you go around her manor where she lives, she seems wealthy, but she has like all these different paintings. Maybe it seems like hundreds of paintings of unusual lifelike paintings of people. And so this is the person. I love this one because it's like, if you ever read the portrait or the picture of Dorian Gray, that's about a guy who he gets this painting done and then he puts it in his attic. And this guy like always is young and youthful and full of vitality, but this painting ages, right? And so it gets older and older and he always stays young. And I always thought that was an interesting classic, when I had to read the classics. But this is the reverse of that. So she makes these paintings and then the people get, worse and worse and the paintings stay the same, but she, more importantly, stays the same. It's kind of like the Highlander or like a vampire, right? This idea that like she maintains her youth by sucking the vitality of others. And I love this kind of character, not as a villain that they're going to like realize, all this bad stuff, but someone who just constantly is there and knowledgeable and seems to be, enjoy their presence. And maybe even in my game, she might ask the barbarian or someone to sit. She's like, oh, you have such a unique way of looking. I want to see how you would be in a portrait. Would you mind sitting for me? I know it's not your normal way, but I'd love to have you in one of my beautiful paintings to adorn my wall. And then she does this painting and it's, she keeps it up there. And maybe at key moments in battles, the barbarian suffers in some way and has no idea why for a long time throughout the game. That would be awesome. And then like toward the end, they begin to figure out who she is. And maybe they just take and destroy the painting. Maybe they want to do something about her. I don't know. But this idea. And so for her, I think describing the way she looks, these layered skirts and flowing and a lot of lipstick and eyeshadow, but also very free-spirited. I would also put in there that she always has a glass of wine close at hand. It just seems like she indulges herself in everything, the wealth around her. And then, the way she talks, for me, when I think of her, I give her like this almost a French accent, although I don't know French. What I would suppose would be a French accent. But like that idea of like, I feel that I've really captured your likeness, wouldn't you say? And then, that lilt of the head. And again, knowledge. This is a great character to throw in when your characters need to know stuff. And you're like, how do I get them to know stuff? Well, it seems like she always knows stuff. And they may begin to question that sometime in this game. Why does she know so much? And it seems like if they go on, you could even drop clues. She seems to know a lot of the things that the people she paints would know, so maybe she, at one point you kind of point out this picture of a train conductor. Are there trains in fantasy settings? We'll say there is. It's train conductor. And it's like, she just can talk about trains and like maybe somewhere in there, she's like, talking about like schedules of trains and the way that trains work. And you can probably get on that train because the coal thing does this. And she just knows so much about trains. You're like, that's crazy. You probably wouldn't think about it at first, but like you drop enough of those kinds of clues, people with various specific knowledge. And it's like, she just happens to know that. Oh, and she has a painting. Was it because she talked to him so much while they sat for her? Or is there something more? So neat character to drop in. And again, I wouldn't do it just as a plot hook for, okay, here's a person that they want to battle and, set straight. I would just let this be a character that like recurs and they come back to, and like, she's very generous with them. And everything about the way she talks is very intriguing to them. And maybe one of them even gets a crush on her and she may pretend to have a crush on one of them. Oh, I want to paint you too. And she may get 2 or 3 paintings of your party. And then you guys start having these like little ill effects happen. And I would just make these random and not tell them exactly why, but like, you're here and all of a sudden the barbarian just, maybe this is when he rolls a 1 or something. It's like, you don't know why, but suddenly his knees buckle and he just gives out for like a round. He can't do anything. And maybe this guy, hasn't like just a complete zero roll on knowledge. And, these are things that happen.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
What about you, Adam? Any thoughts on this character?
Yeah, I really like her as a information broker, and I see her. You kind of got some of that, but this full dress with a long train behind her, and just walking around her posh house with all these paintings. I love that. I love that idea of like you walk in and there's these portraits everywhere, and it's very like these are beautiful, realistic paintings. I think that's a cool thing to bring in, and obviously not every NPC ever is going to have this like collection of things, but those kind of things really do set off of like, okay, something's important here. She's important. There's something weird. I think like that immediately is going to bring that detail is going to bring some like, not necessarily like wariness about her, but just a curiosity about the NPC. But I like her as like information broker. I like her a lot as like even a patron of the party, of someone who may like fund some things or keeps throwing them jobs, or I even like a fetch quest from her of like, oh, there's this person who needs to be brought to my home to be able to sit for this painting. Could you go, and that can be a whole thing where they are working for her and even bringing people to do that, kind of thing. I love the idea of the party actually being painted and how that could like affect things too. So I think
they could even like, hear stuff. I love the idea that, you can visualize these people in lots of different ways. I love to visualize her just vivacious and full of life, but occasionally they come and she seems really run down and like she's working on a painting maybe more intently than normal. When they're there, usually she's all effusive and like full of life. And then, sometimes maybe they even hear about like, oh, she's so dedicated. I remember once we thought she was really hurt. She was kicked by a horse in her stomach, and like she went home and painted all night.
Right. Yeah.
What really happened is she like sucked the vitality out of some poor sap and like healed herself. But you don't find that out till later.
Yeah. I think she could be a really interesting part of a game. So that's a really cool one.
Okay. Hey, let's move on to some questions. But before we do, Adam's wife does like artistic stuff, and she threw in a small run of stickers for us. And look at this. Rise of the GM little sticker. We have a very limited number of those, but I think Adam said if you jump into the comment section, or where was this? You said, hey, we have a very limited number we can give away, but if you are one of these people and you comment, you could get a Rise of the GM sticker.
Yeah, best place to do that is either on our Instagram or on our Twitter. You can comment or DM us for that. And again, we have like 8 or 9 available, but if you're interested in that,
it's not a lot, but you could be. Oh, look at this comment from someone. Josh says, I love the stickers, by the way.
Oh, nice.
What?
Yeah, so on Instagram, it's at Rise of the GM podcast, and on Twitter at Rise of the GM. So let us know, and I'll be happy to get you that.
All right. Well, let's jump to our haversack. We had some questions this week. We want to make some time to get to those before we wrap up today. So what's our first question, Adam?
So first question here. We had 3 different questioners send in to our Gmail. And the first one here is from. Make sure
you can say it. You can do it.
I want to make sure I have memories. Okay. This one is Wataya Hotel 98.
Hey, you said that. So
I said it right. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't butcher it this time. Says, hello, Matthew and Adam. It's Wataya Hotel 98 here, scrying through cyberspace with another RPG question. Here's a lighter one for this week. Do you have any memories as a DM or a player of the DM giving a player an item that becomes comically overpowered and quickly broken at the table? I know my first DM really kicked himself after letting our legendary barbarian have a pair of winged boots. Thank you for sharing your DM wisdom. Sincerely, Wataya Hotel 98.
Yeah, so I will say that as a DM, there have been many things that I've given that I've worried. Is this going to be? Is this going to be too much? Right now, one of the characters in the Dormant Mind has what's called the Wrath Stone, and from the time he was like really low level, he got this Wrath Stone, and it basically, if you've played Fable, you know that force push thing where it just like blasts everybody away from you and knocks them down and does damage. I gave them something that did this as a swift action every single round, and sounded really cool. But like it was so useful, especially because he was a monk and he would do so many hits also, and then boom, knock everybody away and do damage to everybody. And then it got to where it could draw people to him and all this kind of stuff. But even though it's powerful, I don't feel like it was broken. I feel like I could use that as part of his strength and go from there. I also gave another one in that campaign. I had this armor of skulls. It was actually intended for our healer who was so soft and squishy, but it was then snatched up and grabbed by our loot taker, Ragnar. And he put this on, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this like increases his constitution. It gives him this great AC. It like does this line of, I forget, 12d6 damage, of whatever. It was very powerful, and I like worried that it was going to be too much. And I considered, is there something that should happen? There was a time, and this wasn't because I was worried about it being overpowered, but there was a time when all of their magical stuff lost their properties for a while. The Wrathstone and the Skull of Armors included, because of something that happened in the game. And it took several sessions before that came back. And boy, did they feel it. They actively missed it and were so relieved when it came back. But as a player, I the only thing I can ever think of is in my first game, I had this stuff called Narenite. It was just something we made up, but it was pretty awesome. DM gave it to me, and it quickly felt like it was very much stronger than he intended it to be. I didn't say anything. He got with it. What about you, Adam?
I have a problem with this. Like every game, I like to give things and then have immediate giver's regret, like within seconds. So that happens a lot, and you just got to kind of roll with it. And again, I don't like to take things away, but one thing I do think of is like my very first campaign, and I think it was across the board characters getting this, and sorry for the train again, but I do remember, Matthew, you had a sword, and I didn't do my due diligence in the rules. This was 3.5, and they had come out with the Magic Item Compendium later in 3.5's kind of lifespan of like, that was the thing people were playing before 4.0 came out. And they had these power stones, and if I would have done my due diligence, I would have known you're only supposed to put like one of those on a weapon. And I think I may be inflating this, but I'm pretty sure I let you have 3 or 4 on your weapon.
I'm pretty sure I had every element that there was on there. I had a sword with like 6 stones in it. Yeah. I'm like, I'm awesome. Yeah, I'm a psionic character, first of all, who only had like a D4 health. And then I had this great 2-handed great sword with every gem and thing on it. I'd swing that sword and just destroy.
That was
it was awesome.
All me, just like, yeah, sure, that's awesome. So realizing, I think it was like 10 years later, I like finally read that. I'm like, oh, like that's why. But
it was totally broken.
Yeah, that weapon actually has been referenced in our most recent game at one point as a kind of legendary weapon in the world, because no one else can put that many power stones on their sword. So,
no one else had the mental fortitude to wield a sword like that.
So that's one of them. That's one of them.
All right, what's our next question?
Our next question is from Evan. And he says, Evan B, he says, hi guys, episode 4's encounter starter brings to mind that some challenges can be insurmountable, like a level 3 party single-handedly fighting 2 orc armies. When the party stumbles into overwhelming danger through poor luck or decisions, how would you telegraph the danger to the players? Evan B.
Yeah, I often try to think of this if I think they're coming up against, because here's the normal player reaction. We came up on a monster, we're supposed to kill that attack. And sometimes I want them to know this is a lot more than you bargained for, especially if it's something they just stumbled on and I didn't plan for them. But I think it's important to show them the strength instead of just tell them this thing's really strong. You might want to be careful. I think instead you have some other hero, that has stumbled in at the same time who's like, well, it looks like we're of equal, power. I think we can take him. And before you can do anything, he runs over to the beast and the beast just smashes him and flattens him right there. Or, earlier I was given the example of the guy who put the sheet up as like this slippery place. The idea that they're chasing this, snow monster or whatever. I think it's okay to say, like, you see several of his minions lose their footing and they slide right off the edge and scream all the way down until the screaming just fades and you realize that fall's going to kill anything. Something like that is what I would do.
Yeah, full agreement. I would happily kill an NPC to make it clear that happens. They get smashed or whatever. You can always pull a look at the bones, kind of thing from Holy Grail, where it's like there are literally corpses laying around this thing. Like, we need to be careful.
What you don't want to do is kill one of the NPCs that they've come to care about, because then vengeance is on their mind and they're going to attack.
That's I don't know. I like ripping people's hearts out like that. But you're right. They probably would just be like, for Jimmy kneecaps and go after him.
Kneecaps.
I think trying to show don't tell is a good thing with that. I have been known to be like, meta, you sure about this? Kind of thing. Like, I think sometimes that happens. Or coming out swinging, it's like, I'm trying to think of a good example. I feel like recently there was a point in a game where I felt like the posture of everybody was like, this is no big deal. And then the wizard cast a spell or whatever it was. I think maybe the ice demon that you guys fought or something like that. But it did something, and it was like 3 people just lost 90% of their health points just now, and everybody kind of sat up, kind of thing, and it got a little more dire.
But yet we did not walk away.
They didn't walk away. But so maybe that's not a good example.
I'm trying to think. There's only been, I think, in the dormant mind, just a handful of times when you guys have like actively walked away. And the only one I can think of right now is the mustard jelly.
Yeah, the fiendish mustard jelly.
Mustard jelly. Somehow you guys all like said, this is too much. Let's get out.
Yeah, that was a no. I remember there was a dragon. We had this crazy, like, we had to climb a mountain to the top of this essentially a mountain. And we had been fighting through like boulders being thrown down at us and having to fight through creatures. And it was about like haste. And it's like, we need to get in here and do this thing. But there was a dragon like chained at the top that you had there as like a guard. I think it was sleeping at the time. And we're like, and I'm, my barbarian is just like, we can take this thing. It's like, we don't need to take this thing. We need to go. But that was the perfect time for, and we've talked about this, but I had that like flame spirit inside me that would force me to roll to see if I would do something stupid. And it's like the one time I was going to choose not to do the stupid thing on my own, the flame spirit made me attack the dragon anyway. So we were going to walk away from that one, but then I think we did run eventually. I think
what happened was an NPC character like knocked you down.
That's right. Amira. Yeah. She
said, "Don't do it,"
which was, that's right. Which actually was not the first time in that game that my barbarian got knocked out by a monk type person to save us from fighting things. So Nightclaw did that to me too. So those are some things. I think that show don't tell that you brought up at the beginning is a good way. Yeah.
All right, let's hit our last one.
Yeah. So Yeah, we have two more in the hopper,
Okay.
and I think we'll see where this goes. We may want to save one for next time too. Um, so that was. I'm sorry, we have three more in the hopper because that was from Evan. So Josh sent us in three questions. And the first one is this. He says, hey, Matt, Adam and Matthew, a couple questions for you. The first one is, when planning for a character arc for a specific PC, how do you help a player develop their character through the arc, but also bring your other PCs along for the ride without making it all about one person?
Okay. So how do we help a character arc? For me, yeah, it's that there are, I typically don't just have a single player arc. In my mind, I kind of think, where do I want to eventually take all of these characters to? And for me, it's like, I'm not going to feature everyone every time, but I'm not going to feature one guy all the time. And so I got into, when I did one of my first big campaigns, the Oracle of Order, I made the mistake of deciding that one player was going to be the entire key to the whole campaign. He was the son of the emperor who had gone insane. He didn't know this yet. He gave me this cool backstory, and in my mind, I'm like, yeah, he was taken from his family, ended up being adopted. What he doesn't know is that his real family was the emperor and all of this. Well, then that player quit playing after like the second or third session. They're just like, yeah, I'm out, guys. And they left. I'm like, man, my whole campaign hinges on this guy. And so, I had to like change my thought process on how I made people the hinge. But yeah, several times it's not so much like they are the key, but often I'm like, what's their growth going to be? What is it that's going to be important to them later? And I think about some things I want to happen in each of their stories, and I sprinkle those throughout. And so every couple sessions, maybe something happens that's more particularly important to one guy. But then I don't just like focus on that one person all the time to the exclusion of other people, because that would be very boring.
Right.
Like he said, bringing the other PCs along for the ride without it being interesting. So it's about like it's the camera. We're going to talk about like how the camera focuses action. My camera also focuses on stories. You read your good fantasy books, and sometimes it's annoying. So I read Wheel of Time. I know Wheel of Time's all the big rage right now on Amazon Prime. But when I read it, I got so interested in Rand and Perrin and was it Thomas? I can't even remember now. These three guys, and they kept switching to these other characters that I didn't care anything about. Gwyn and whoever. And I'm just like, oh man, can you just quit telling me about this person? Because I want to get back to the person I care about. But it's that same sort of thing. It's like you jump from story to story in like how you focus the camera.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think there's ways to like I'm thinking about right now in this game that we're in, the Jade Mask game. There's a very heavy for Matthew's character, for Eliakim, because his brother is there, one of his brothers who he's had a hard relationship with, and bringing him in and what's going to happen with those conversations. So there's definitely a focus, I feel like, that happens on that. But also allowing for, there's been times where people are like, I kind of want to do this, or letting them follow that, not just focusing it all on Eliakim and Latimer the whole time. Those side things becoming bigger pieces that tie into the reason that they're there. One of the things I did was in that situation was because people had kind of split off to kind of figure out what was going on in the city, that actually sprinkled some like hooks that were like just for not in the end just for them, but it was like, this is information for you all to know. So like our barbarian and our fighter had went off and had done a pretty good job of creating an opening that's going to get followed up on at some point. But while they're coming back, there was an NPC that came into the mix that led them to some other clues about like the larger picture going on there. So even though I feel like, we're at Eliakim's brother's wedding, so there is like a spotlight in some ways on Matthew's character's story. In the midst of all that, there's these other pieces that only those other people are getting. Actually, Josh, who's asking this question, he's a drow. There was a connection to the drow culture also that happened to tie that and make it like more broad for the party. So those are some things I like to do, is just kind of sprinkle those things in and see what kind of hooks people grab onto.
And one further comment on this. It's you as the GM need to do some work too. So what typically happens is I'll have a character who, like, certain players are much better at this. They give a little bit of backstory, but they don't like answer everything about their backstory. They're like, my character, he went to the academy, and while he was there, he kept seeing this guy in black in doorways that would just like disappear as soon as he saw him. And then they never say anything else about that. They give that to the GM, and that sparks in the GM mind, oh, that could be this person, or I could really play off of that and go. And then you have other people who, when they're giving their backstories, they're like, I come from a small town and I was poor. It doesn't really leave a hook. And so sometimes prompting players to give you something that's unresolved. What's something that's odd or mysterious that's happened in your character's life? And then that will give you as a GM some place to go. Because what often happens is the people who give us those nice little mysteries, we get excited about it, and then we focus on them. And the other people who aren't as imaginative get kind of short shifted. So as the GM, you've got to do some work to make sure, hey, let's get a little mystery in each character. And they don't know, so I like to do that. I like to throw out things and say, okay, here's some information, but I'm going to leave the rest to you, GM. You do whatever you want with that. And that almost always sparks better ideas and stories in a GM than me telling them, here's what I want to do by the end of my character.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So. Exactly. I think for our time today, I'd like to hold on to these other two questions and give them a better answer than try to like rush it. If that
sounds good. So Josh, do know that your questions will be answered. They are in the haversack, and they have not been lost, because the cool thing is when you reach in the haversack, what you need is right at the top.
Yeah.
You know this. And it will be for us too. Okay. Well, I think that I have totally, earlier when I was trying to get to different sounds, I got away from our end, but we are going to sign off with that. This is not the right music.
It is for today.
It is for today.
Reach in is what you get.
So today, this is it. Hey, we're going to come back next time and talk more about the idea of storytelling and its importance. So be sure to join us then here on Rise of the GM. All you GMs, keep ascending, and we'll see you next time here on Rise of the GM.
Thanks, all.